Mark, sometimes you don't need analytical data to tell you the story. Just look at the situation, find the trend, and make the decision.
Tyler Boyd's dip in production last year better correlates with Andy Dalton being off the field than it does with A.J. Green being off the field, despite public perception.
You can't watch just highlight film because highlight film only shows the good things. Watch the player's actual game tape because you see the good and the bad.
In 7 games in 2018, where all 3 starting Rams receivers were healthy, Brandon Cooks led the trio in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and total PPR points by a considerable margin.
It's a beautiful day for football. Welcome into the RotoBros Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Chris McConnell.
I'm Mark Wemkin.
And we are your RotoBros. Hey, Mark, it's week 12. Chugging along in the season. We seem to say it every single week. There's obviously been a ton going on. We're going to dive in. We've got a huge show for everybody. But first, as always, let them know where they can find you.
You're going to find me on Twitter at Mark Wemkin. That's MarkWemken. And you're also going to find me on thequantedge.com every Tuesday, snaps and targets report, every Thursday, injury impact report. And then all weekend long, I'll be in the Discord offering fantasy football advice. DFS, we'll be talking DFS. The Discord's a lot of fun. Also, make sure you're checking out that RotoBros Patreon to get in that Discord chat as well. We have a lot of fun there. We talk DFS, sits, everything under the football sun. So make sure you're checking that out. Chris, where are we going to find you, man?
You can find me on Twitter at Mind of McConnell. And of course, you can find Mark and I, as always, at FSA Fantasy Sports Advice and Analysis. That's on Facebook. So go to Facebook, type in FSA Fantasy, and the group will pop right up. And you will be a part of the largest, most active fantasy sports community on the planet. So definitely check that out. You will not regret it. So, Mark, look, it's been a busy season. We've had a lot of fun. We are, 19 episodes into the RotoBros here. It's been a blast, and we're chugging along. Week 12, like I mentioned, there's a lot of news, but there's a lot of big takeaways and a lot of stuff that we want to get into. And, of course, we're near the play. We're at the playoff push. We are near the playoffs. So a lot of people, they need to find some buy low candidates, especially for those leagues that have not had those trade deadlines passed yet. A lot of mine have not had those deadlines passed. You have several that have, but for those of you that are still waiting on your trade deadline to come and go, we have a lot of our favorite buy low candidates as well. We're going to discuss Marlon Mack. We're going to discuss Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Dak Prescott. We got a lot on the docket for you guys today. But first, Mark, let's get to some of the weekend's biggest news. Of course, injuries. That's what we always like to start with to get everybody sort of up to speed on what happened. First of all, we've got Juju. He's been a disappointment this year. I got a question today from somebody in FSA. Should I drop Juju Smith-Schuster? I forgot who they were looking to pick up. But yeah, should I drop Juju Smith-Schuster? And just the beginning of that question, it's amazing that we're even having that, is it not?
You know, when I was doing my projections over the summer, my projections did not account for Ben Roethlisberger dying and Juju Smith-Schuster catching passes from Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph has just been absolutely abysmal. He's like Mitchell Trubisky East. It's been so bad.
Good way to put it.
And now he might have full-blown CTE because of that freaking hit from Myles Garrett. And hey, you know what? I apologize for making a CTE joke. CTE is not funny, but we are witnessing it firsthand with Antonio Brown and everything that's going on with him. So
he says as he makes a funny,
you know, we have fun here. I'm into black humor, dark humor, you know, really into that kind of thing. But with Juju, I mean, let's assume he does miss. He's dealing with a concussion right now, and he's got a knee injury as well. He's only missed 93 snaps this year. So like, we don't have a big sample size to kind of assess what this offense is going to look like without him, but Juju himself has been good. Like, he's only seeing 6 targets a game compared to seeing 10 targets a game last year. And that's why his production has dipped by 50%. You know, on a per target and a per catch basis, he's every bit as good as he was last year. Passing volume is just way down for the Steelers. And a big part of that is Mason Rudolph. There was just no way to project for that. And that's why Juju Smith-Schuster has been such a disappointment. But you pull him off the field over the course of 93 snaps, yards per attempt for the Steelers drops all the way down to 4.8. Passing success rate drops by 4%. So if Juju can't go next week, this is going to be a very ugly look for the offense that's already without James Conner.
Yeah, and I can tell you what the offense is going to look like without these guys. You're also not going to have Deontay Johnson, because Deontay Johnson is dealing with a concussion. That's something else that Juju's dealing with. It's not just a knee injury. He's dealing with a concussion. He's officially entered the league's protocol, so it's actually not looking very good at this point in time for him to be suiting up this week. But James Washington and Johnny Holton, the Hall of Famer Johnny Holton, I kid. That's going to be their primary wideouts for Week 12 if Juju Smith-Schuster is forced to sit. So you can pretty much ignore those guys. So it doesn't look good for Juju this week. Somebody it does look good for, Mark, is Sterling Shepard.
I was going to ask, though, one question on the Steelers. What are the odds Jalen Samuels leads the team in target share next week?
If James Conner does not play, I would say it's actually pretty solid.
He's going to see like a 30% target share if Juju and Deontay Johnson can't go.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen what Mason and Devlin do. They love to dump off to their running back. So if James Conner plays, James Conner's obviously RB1, of course, if he's healthy. But Jalen Samuels hasn't been really spectacular. He's not anything like he was last year, but he's obviously with the target share and the amount of volume that he's going to get with all these guys being out, he's definitely somebody you would want to look at. Sterling Shepard, though, like I said, Mark, is returning this week. So he is finally back, likely going to be back in the fold. Looks like he's going to be out of concussion protocol and ready to rock. So Daniel Jones is going to have all his weapons back, finally, under one roof again. So that's good for his continued development the rest of the season into 2020. So Sterling Shepard's back. I think that's a good thing. Now, guys that own Darius Slayton may want to sort of pull the reins back on Darius Slayton a little bit. Look, everybody knows I love Darius Slayton. I've been high on him since the draft. But the bottom line is it's Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard over there. And, Darius Slayton's going to be used. He's going to get his, but he's going to be used in certain situations. I don't want to say a situational deep threat, because I feel like that's something more like Kenny Stills, but he's still a guy that's really, he's going to see some deep shots, and that's pretty much going to be the gist of his volume with Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate both on the field, especially even if Evan Ingram comes back as well.
He should still be the third wide receiver in 11 personnel, but those two wide receiver sets, he's not going to get those anymore. It'll be Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate. I know this is a great acquisition for Danny Dimes, for sure. Passing success rate has been 5% higher with Sterling Shepard on the field this year. Explosive pass rate's been 3% higher, and yards per pass attempt has been about half a yard higher. All of that with Sterling Shepard on the field. So Danny Dimes should definitely benefit just from having Sterling Shepard back. Golden Tate should see a decline in target share. We expected that. I definitely think we can expect, once Evan Ingram is back, I definitely think we can expect a decline in target share from Evan Ingram. Like, this is going to drop everybody's target share. Everyone right now, you already mentioned Darius Slayton. I think he may be unplayable just because he's not going to be playing 90% of the snaps anymore. It'll be more like 60. And
outside of DFS, of course, season long, I would agree with you. Unless you are 100% desperate, Darius Slayton with a healthy Golden and a healthy Sterling, I just don't think he's going to be a great start.
I don't think I'll play him in DFS either.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to fight for the playoffs. Like you need to have, and you know me, I've always said I'm a man of consistency. I don't want punt plays when I'm trying to fight for the playoffs. I want somebody who I can rely on, to get those consistent points week in and week out. I want the guaranteed points if I'm trying to make the playoffs. I don't want, I don't want 2 targets for 76 yard touchdown to be my shot at making the playoffs, because the odds are a lot lower. Okay.
So where do you stand with Daniel Jones then? I mean, would you trust him going into the playoffs with Sterling Shepard back?
It would depend on who my options are at quarterback. A guy we talked about and a guy we'll kind of get into before, like Sam Darnold. No, I wouldn't.
I was going to say, let's say you've been streaming quarterbacks and your options are like Sam Darnold, Danny Dimes, Derek Carr. We can probably stop it there.
Out of those 3, I'd probably take Daniel Jones second there, just because of his floor, because of his running ability, and because he's got such talent around him. But Sam Darnold, look, we talked about it 2 or 3 weeks ago. We told everybody, hey, go buy Sam Darnold. Like, go scoop him up. If you have an extra spot, you may need a quarterback. This is a guy that's could get you to the playoffs, could win you some playoff games, maybe even win you a title. because that's how attractive the schedule was, and he's showing it now. Now it's a week later than what we thought, admittingly, but these last two games, he's a different quarterback. So yeah, Sam Darnold would definitely be the option for me over Daniel Jones when it comes to streaming quarterbacks the rest of the season.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, Sam Darnold has just looked relatively good over the last couple of weeks. He had, 6 total touchdowns over the last 2 games. At least 230 yards passing at both of them. He's averaged 8.3 yards per attempt and then 10.93. That's adjusted yards per attempt. So he's looked very good. He's got Oakland and Cincinnati and Miami all lined up in a row. I don't think you can ask for a better schedule over the next 3 games than Oakland, Cincinnati, and Miami. All three of those teams are top 4 in the NFL, or I should say top 4 in the NFL in yards per attempt allowed to quarterbacks this year. So this is just a great spot for Sam Darnold. So I'm with you there. But hey, if Sam Darnold isn't, I do think this is good for Danny Dimes completely getting Sterling Shepard back. So if you're desperate at quarterback, Sam Darnold isn't available, I think you can stream him as well.
Tyreek Hill and Damian Williams left the game with a couple injuries here. Tyreek Hill seemed to pull a hammy on a play. And then, of course, Damian Williams had the chest injury. LaShawn McCoy took over. Darrell Williams vultured a touchdown there as well. So we are back. It seems we are back to a Kansas City backfield that does not include Damian Williams and a passing offense that does not include Tyreek Hill. So there's a guy that I think, and depending on how long Tyreek Hill is out, I think there's a guy that I just thought of as I'm thinking about it, that we can sort of add to our buy low list that we'll get into here in a little bit. So you guys definitely stay tuned for that as well. I understand Tyreek Hill is very important, and affects a lot of people, and maybe even Damian Williams as well. But with Pat Mahomes owners, I don't think they should really panic. I mean, Pat Mahomes is going to be just fine. He's just going to pretty much put another receiver in the chamber and shoot to kill. So that's pretty much what Pat Mahomes does in that offense, right? So I don't think this really hurts Pat Mahomes all that much. I think he could end up really helping Travis Kelce owners, if anything else. So I would definitely be on the lookout for Travis Kelce to improve a little bit here.
Patrick Mahomes' numbers literally don't change with Tyreek Hill off the field this year. 8.76 yards per attempt with Tyreek Hill on, 8.83 yards per attempt with Tyreek Hill on, 8.76 with Tyreek Hill off, and his touchdown percentage is 6.2% with both Reek on and Reek off. So, and that's Tyreek Hill is a game breaker. His presence does affect the offense, but it really doesn't affect Patrick Mahomes' fantasy production. So with Tyreek Hill out, you're looking at an increased snap share and increased target share for Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman. I don't think Sammy Watkins' role changes much. He's been quite a disappointment since that spike week in week 1. So I definitely think the guys we're looking at, Mecole Hardman's got to be the first one, right?
Well, he's actually going to be the guy. Way to spoil the surprise, Mark. He's going to be the guy. Well, we can kind of get into as a buy low. I do like him as a buy low, but yeah, he's definitely the guy. Demarcus Robinson, I think he had a real shot. We saw the first couple weeks. He had a real shot to really step in and be that new great threat for this offense, and he's just disappointed. Maybe even more than Sammy Watkins, actually. So for guys that really thought that the Demarcus Robinson was going to really take the top off, it really hasn't happened. Mecole Hardman's really been the guy that's helped himself with Tyreek Hill off the field. So yeah, I think with Tyreek Hill yet again off the field, I think this is going to help Mecole Hardman. And look, I think in a lot of leagues, when it goes to Damian Williams, I think in a lot of leagues, LaShawn McCoy is available. He's on the wire. And I understand Darrell Williams, you may want to pick him up off the waiver as well. I've seen him dropped several times the last 3 weeks. So, obviously their stock goes up a little bit. You don't want to rely on those guys, but it is some depth if you're trying to get into the playoffs. But we'll see how serious these injuries are. We don't really know. We don't even know if they're going to be out this coming week yet. So nothing's determined, but with a hamstring injury with a guy like Tyreek Hill, that's definitely something you really don't want to play with fire, especially when you're a team like the Chiefs. I don't think that really need Tyreek Hill to, in order to make the playoffs, maybe to win the division, but maybe not to make the playoffs. But Damian Williams, I just don't know if that's going to be a huge loss for them either. But we'll see what happens with him. Darwin Thompson may get some more work as well, but again, we don't know if Damian Williams is even going to miss any time yet. So
the Damian Williams injury would matter if running backs mattered, but they don't. But
they don't, unfortunately.
Yeah, LaShawn McCoy will step in. LaShawn McCoy will be just fine. Darrell Williams will be just fine. Darwin Thompson isn't what he was hyped up to be. He never was going to be. He's just not that type of player. I will say this, though. Mecole Hardman did outsnap Demarcus Robinson on Monday night. He outsnapped him by about 13 snaps, played about 20% more of the snaps. So Mecole Hardman, he might be the starter. I think he's
one of these guys like,
man.
Yeah, he's one of these guys like Eddie Royal used to be. A lot of people listening, I don't know if they'll remember Eddie Royal or not for the Broncos, but Eddie Royal was a pretty solid weapon for a few years out there in Denver, and I think he's a better version, really, of Eddie Royal. To be honest with you, I think you can do more with him. He's the same sort of Swiss Army knife that Royal was, but I think he's a lot more explosive than Eddie. So a guy that I just want to mention this because it is very small news, but it could turn out, depending on where he goes, if he goes anywhere, could turn out to be pretty significant. Alex Collins is no longer suspended, and he seems to be healed from his broken leg that he was recovering from. So Alex Collins is available to play. He's available to sign. There's a lot of teams right now. This is a guy that's better than a lot of these end of the roster, running backs on teams right now. I would not be surprised if a guy like Alex Collins ends up getting signed. I think a team like the Colts could be a team that looks into a guy like Alex Collins, especially for more early down work. We'll get into the Colts backfield here in just a minute, but Alex Collins, obviously, I think he's probably going to be signed somewhere. You don't want to go spend all your fab on him. You probably won't have to spend anything on him, but I think it's definitely at least worth mentioning as teams gear up for the playoffs. Injuries continue to occur. He's a guy that obviously a couple years ago had a really solid season. So kind of reminds me of kind of the season that Ernest Graham had years ago, or a couple seasons that Ernest Graham had years ago. So one of those one couple year fantasy wonders, unfortunately. But Alex Collins is out there. He's an extra body, and he's more talented than a lot of the backup running backs in the league right now. So I think he's a guy that people need to keep their eye on, keep him in your back pocket. But Mark, this is the biggest news really from an injury standpoint of the weekend that we need to get to. And it segues perfectly into our first big takeaway. Marlon Mack broke his hand this weekend. He is going to be out several weeks. For all intents and purposes, I mean, his fantasy season could be over. So if you have Marlon Mack and you were thinking of having him going into the playoffs, you're not going to have him for the playoff stretch. It's possible you could have him for a playoff game or two, maybe have him back for your championship, but it's just as possible you may not have him back at all, so you need to start making other plans. Marlon Mack out several weeks. Now you step in, you've got Jordan Wilkins, you're coming back from injury. He's practicing today. Jonathan Williams is the guy everybody's talking about. Obviously, Nyheim Hines, the preferred pass-catching back. So there's some stuff going on in this backfield right now that I think Colts fans and even Marlon Mack owners need to be aware of. But you like Jonathan Williams, I think, as the main waiver target. Is that an accurate statement?
Chris, I was more on your side when you said there's no one to pick up here. But like there has to be. There has to be, because the Colts are one of the run heaviest teams in the NFL. So somebody is going to get work here. And are they going to be as good as Marlon Mack? Probably not. Marlon Mack was 10th in the NFL in rushing missed tackles forced. So he was having a good season. He was playing good football. But somebody has to step in. And Jonathan Williams led the charge. He played 45.6% of the snaps. And I don't believe Jordan Wilkins was active in that game. I'm showing he played. Yeah, he played zero snaps. He played 0 snaps. I think he will get work. I do think if he's still with the roster, I haven't even looked, but I do think if he's still on the team, he'll be activated and he'll get work. I do think this will increase Nyheim Hines' snap share at least a little bit. Played 35% of the snaps last week. I do think he'll be up closer to 45 or 50. So he just might be roster worthy, but this is going to be tough. We're at a point in the fantasy season where people don't have a lot of fab left. We're going into week 12. So it's like a why not kind of situation now. Jonathan Williams might fall into 20 carries per game by default. He's not a good player. I'm not saying he is, but there is a chance that this guy could be seeing 20 carries a game through the fantasy playoffs. And if you have fab left, just go and get him and hope that's what happens. That's what I'm doing in all of my leagues.
See, for me, I don't think it's that simple because we're looking at it. Marlon Mack, and this is just the last several games for Marlon Mack, 14 carries against Jacksonville, 19 against Miami, 21 against Pittsburgh, 19 against Denver, 18 against Houston. To me, if you are, none of these guys are obviously Marlon Mack. We agree on that. They're not even, I don't even think they're in the same universe of talent.
No, Marlon Mack is good at football.
But with guys like Jordan Wilkins and John, if Jordan Wilkins was not going to be in the picture, I would agree that Jonathan Williams is probably a back end RB2, high end RB3 that's going to see 20 touches a game. But I don't think that's going to be the case with Jordan Wilkins in the picture. I honestly think that if Jordan Wilkins comes back healthy, he practiced today, so I don't know how much they're going to give him in his first game back this weekend. But so monitor that. But if you lose out on Jonathan Williams on the waiver wire, there's no reason why you should not be trying to go get Jordan Wilkins for free, because this guy could end up being the lead back, on early downs and goal line touches. So I don't think I don't think anybody needs to go into it expecting either of these guys and either of the three to receive 20 touches a game, because I just don't think it's going to happen, especially when Marlon Mack was barely receiving that. I think it's going to be more of a headache RBBC. This isn't going to be something that people should be relying on unless you're desperate. You know what I mean? Unless you have just zero other options at running back because you're getting hit with so many injuries or your players are just not playing very well. That, to me, is the only time where you should be actively starting these guys, in my opinion, because I just think it's going to be an ugly situation.
Okay, but starting them and trying to acquire them are two different things, because sure. I do think you should be trying to acquire them. Obviously, if you're making a playoff run, no, I'm with Chris. You can't trust these guys. You have to figure something else out unless you are absolutely desperate. But just so we're clear, you should be actively trying to pursue one of these guys just before we know what happens. But if you're saying we can't start him right away, no, we need to see how this plays out next week with Jordan Wilkins active.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And when I say, I want to make it clear for some of the listeners, because when I say there's no running back to own in that backfield, what I mean is it's not the same thing as there's no running back worth owning. Go ahead and try to grab one of these guys. I wouldn't blow all your fab on Jonathan Williams, because I think if you can post a moderate amount of fab for Jonathan Williams and you lose out, I think you can keep that money that you didn't use on him and you can get Jordan Wilkins for free, or maybe even Nyheim Hines for free. Probably not Hines for free. You probably have to use a little bit on him, but certainly Jordan Wilkins for free. And I think that they're worth owning, but I don't think there is a single guy that we can point out that's the running back to own. For instance, in San Francisco's backfield, if Tevin Coleman goes down, then Matt Breida is the running back to own. But it doesn't mean that Raheem Mostert or maybe even Jeffrey Wilson at that, for that matter, are not worth rostering. Obviously, they're
Correct.
worth rostering. They've shown it. But that's kind of what I mean.
All right.
When I say there's no running back worth owning.
Now, you're making a great point, and I agree with you. So let's take this a step further. Everyone, after you listen to this podcast, should be going to your waiver wires in all of your leagues right now and checking for a few names. And if they're on the waiver wire, you need to be picking them up like right now. Yeah. Alexander Mattison, Tony Pollard. They need to be owned in every single league going into the playoffs. If something, God willing, we do not wish for injuries ever. But God willing, if Dalvin Cook goes down, if Ezekiel Elliott goes down, Alex Mattison is a league winner. Tony Pollard is a league winner. You will win your fantasy football league if you go into the playoffs with one of those guys and one of the guys in front of them goes down. They need to be rostered. They need to be rostered.
I'll even throw in another name there, Reggie Bonifon, the backup for McCaffrey. I think that Bonifon is a guy that you could throw in there as well. Now, look, I'm not going to tell anybody go drop LaShawn McCoy at the end of your bench to acquire Reggie Bonifon or Tony Pollard, because the odds are that those guys are not going to get hurt. And then if some of your guys get hurt and you cut a guy like LaShawn McCoy or Kareem Hunt for that matter at the end of your bench, I don't know why you're cutting Kareem Hunt, but just follow me here. If you cut one of those guys at the end of your bench at running back and all of a sudden one of your lead backs gets hurt, well, guess what? Now you're pretty much out of luck because you probably just lost LaShawn McCoy on waivers to somebody else. So It depends on who you're cutting, or if you've got a backup tight end, you're still rostering OJ Howard. Get OJ Howard the hell off your roster and go pick up Tony Pollard, Alex Madison, Reggie Bond, someone like that, just in case. Because I'm telling you, it's kind of like the Thursday night football rule. Don't put a Thursday night football player in your flex. It's probably not going to hurt you, but just in case it does, you want to follow the rule, because if it does hurt you, it could be catastrophic. Same thing goes for this rule in reverse here. So 100% agree there. Definitely look at your bench and see if there's anybody that you can cut to add some of those high-end backups if in case somebody with an injury history like Dalvin Cook does get hurt. But one thing I want to talk about Marlon Mack, though, Mark, is...
Oh, wait, I have one more name. Because we're talking about this guy anyway, and it's Raquel Armstead. He should be owned too, but we're talking about Leonard Fournette later, so you can go on.
Marlon Mack, it kind of frustrates me because with the way the Colts use him, I know now he could be out for the rest of the fantasy season, so it may not even mean much what I'm about to say, but I just needed to vent for a minute, especially for our guy, Chris Yingling, who I know wanted some Colts talk. What is going on with him in the passing game? Why is he not being used? Can I ask that?
Is it because he's not a good receiver?
I don't think that's true. I think Marlon Mack is a better receiver than what we've seen. I just don't think he's getting the opportunity. This dude has not seen more than 3 targets in a game all season. He's gotten 3 targets in 4 games this year, and he's gotten 2 targets the last 4 weeks. To me, that's inexplicable. Inexcusable.
He's last in the backfield in yards per route run. Jordan Wilkins is better. Nyheim Hines is better. Jonathan Williams is better. They're all better in yards per route run.
I want the better football player getting the work out of there. Now, look, Nyheim Hines.
I'll take the better pass catcher. Nyheim Hines is averaging 1.91 yards per route run. He's a fantastic receiver.
He's a better pass catcher. But that doesn't mean that in the last 4 weeks, Marlon Mack should have 2 targets. You should have more than that. I mean, he's not that bad of a pass catcher, if you could even argue he's bad at all. I think he's a fine pass catcher. I just think they just so happen to have a much better one in Nyheim Hines behind him that they can use for that role. But 2 targets, I mean, to me, I think Marlon Mack could be, he could be an absolute RB1 if they worked him into that role. But again, I understand Nyheim Hines and having him in that role is fine. You may want to keep Marlon Mack, his touches at bay a little bit, but I still think that they should involve him a little bit more in the passing game. One guy we need to get to, though, because we got a lot to talk about tonight. Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is a guy we haven't really talked a whole lot about on the show, and we should be ashamed because he is RB2 on the season. He is 2nd in the league in yards from scrimmage. This is a guy that a lot of people, look, you and I were high on him. I was a little bit lower on him because I was still, I had questions. Okay, they addressed the O-line, but how good is the O-line? This is a guy that was my number 1 running back in the draft 2 years ago. I absolutely am, I'm a Dalvin Cook fanboy. So I'm glad that he's finally doing what we all knew he could do all along. He just had to stay healthy, and he also needed an offensive line worth a damn, and he's finally seems to have that. So everything seems to be working for him, and obviously it's coming together to the tune of 1,017 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground. He's got 455 receiving yards on 54 targets. So this guy has really been amazing for the Vikings. Some people are even talking about him in the MVP talk. That to me is going a little overboard, but Dalvin Cook has been absolutely phenomenal, and I think for a lot of teams he could end up being their fantasy MVP.
Yeah, the Vikings are 6th in Pro Football Outsiders adjusted line yards right now. The Vikings offensive line is playing out of their freaking mind. They are just fantastic. They've been a big reason why Kirk Cousins is having this dominant season he's having. He's only being pressured on 33% of his dropbacks, which is like way down from last year. So rebuilding this offensive line is one of the big reasons why they are dominating the way they are. And the thing with Dalvin Cook is we always knew Dalvin Cook had the talent. I said this in FSA last night. It was just a question of whether or not he'd get a clean bill of health. He gets a clean bill of health, he's going to finish top 3 in yards from scrimmage. I said he would lead the league in yards from scrimmage. He's 100 yards behind Christian McCaffrey right now, and Dalvin Cook's already had his bye week. I don't think he catches McCaffrey, but I think it's whack that he's on pace to finish second in yards from scrimmage, and he had the 19th best odds coming into the year. Phillip Lindsay and Joe Mixon both had better Vegas odds to lead the league in yards from scrimmage than Dalvin Cook. That makes no sense. That never made sense.
Why. Well, Joe Mixon, I can understand the argument. Phillip Lindsay, as much as I love him, nobody's a bigger Lindsay fan than me. That I really don't understand as much. But yeah, I mean, look, second in the NFL in rushing yards, only behind McCaffrey. Third in the NFL in receiving yards, behind McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. So Dalvin is, again, he's finally doing what we all knew and thought that he could do the last couple of years. He had been frustrating. I think that's really one of the reasons why a lot of people were a little apprehensive about going all in on him for the third straight year. For some people, the second straight year. And because they really didn't know what was going to happen with this offensive line, if he was going to stay healthy. They drafted Alexander Madison. They didn't know if he was going to be a bigger threat than what he has been. And Alexander Madison's been fine when he's gotten some looks. But of course, we talked about, at the end of the summer, before the season started, about how this offense was going to work. And we talked about the offensive coordinator change. DeFilippo's not there anymore. Kevin Stefanski is there. They were going to be more run heavy. That always looked good for Dalvin Cook. And so I think it seems to all be paying its dividends now. But this is what an offensive line can do for a running back. And I'm looking at you, Ezekiel Elliott.
The Vikings are currently 7th in neutral run rate, and they are 2nd in run rate when they're up 2 possessions. They run the football 74% of the time when they are up by 2 possessions or more. This is what the Vikings wanted to do. This is all they did to close out the year with Kevin Stefanski at OC. This is all Gary Kubiak has done his whole career. Like, you should have seen this coming.
And having a running game that's been this good, Mark, I think has been a big, we were talking before the show, has been a big reason why Kirk Cousins has all of a sudden just had this incredible surge of production. And this is coming even without Adam Thielen for a lot of this season. Like, Adam Thielen's still out. He may not even play this week. Like, this is what Kirk Cousins has been doing.
He still has his best wide receiver on the field, so he should be fine.
Okay, his second best wide receiver. I get it, but I think that and obviously with Adam Thielen, speaking of not having Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph is a guy that has really been turning it on right now.
His target share goes from like 6% to 19% with Adam Thielen off the field this year.
Skyrockets. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. He's a solid safety blanket for Kirk Cousins. And look, I'm not going to say Kirk Cousins' production is only because of Dalvin Cook and all that. I think it is. I think it helps. But look, praise be to Kirk Cousins for what he's been doing. Like, hats off to you, man. I mean, and look, the offensive line is better. They're protecting him better. They're not
Kevin
just opening up.
Stefanski is coordinating a really good offense.
He
is
really
coordinating a very good offense. Yeah. Kyle Rudolph's target share goes from 6.5% to 15.3% with Adam Thielen off the field.
Wild.
Like, he's roster worthy. He needs to be on a roster as long as Adam Thielen is out. Irv Smith Jr.'s target share spikes too. It goes from 6.5 to 14.5.
And what's funny is we have Kevin Stefanski takes over in Minnesota for John DeFilippo. Speaking of John DeFilippo, Leonard Fournette down there in Jacksonville, you go from one great running back in that class to another great running back in that class. The difference is, however, Leonard Fournette right now, they're both top 10 running backs. Dalvin Cook RB2, Leonard Fournette RB8. The difference, though, Mark, is that Leonard Fournette, as we know, he's been especially this year, he's been a volume-based RB1. He needs the carries to sustain the success that he has had, and that's why I think the last 2 weeks we have seen Leonard Fournette not have great games. He's gotten 11 carries and 8 carries in back-to-back weeks. I think is inexcusable for DeFilippo. I know you want to throw the ball, but look, Nick Foles ain't it, Chief. Nick Foles ain't your guy.
Neither is Gardner Minshew.
And neither is Gardner Minshew. And not only that, I like DJ Chark and I like D.D. Westbrook, but to me, you don't have a numero uno full-fledged wide receiver one. Like, look, I'm not disrespecting DJ Chark. I think DJ Chark has been fantastic. He's obviously been pretty solid in fantasy as well. I think in this group of receivers, he's a number one guy. but I don't think that for his career, he should be a number one alpha X wide receiver. I think he'd be better suited to have a Julio-esque sort of wide receiver. And I say that, Julios don't come around very often, but people know what I mean when I say that. A Hopkins-esque sort of wide receiver across from him, I think he'd be better suited for that. But regardless, I understand they want to throw the football. But when you've got a guy like Leonard Fournette back there, that your team's success and your team's capability of being a very competitive team really hinders on this guy right now. And it's a shame that the last two games they've sort of gotten away from that, from running the football as much as they had.
No, I see where you're coming from, but like the thing is, DJ Chark is PFF's 14th highest graded receiver right now. He's 16th in the NFL in yards per route run at 2.09. Like DJ Chark is balling. He is playing very, very, very good football. He's playing
wide
at a
receiver
very high level. He's playing at a very high level. So I don't want to be the one to say that, he's not an alpha. I think he is, just based on what he's done this year. But as far as Leonard Fournette is concerned, he's still seeing the targets. He's second on the team or third on the team in target share. He's got a 16% target share on the year, 58 total targets. Over the past 2 weeks, or I should say the past 2 games rather, because they did not play in week 10, but just over the last 2 games, he's still seen that 14% target share. So they're still getting the football in his hands. You got to take into account game script, man. Like, they were never in the Houston game. They got their ass kicked from start to finish, and that's why Leonard Fournette, they couldn't run the football. Don't run the football when you're losing football games. Like, when you are losing, you shouldn't be running. And that's what DeFilippo was doing. He's like, all right, we're losing, so I'm going to be throwing. That's what you should do. And that's why Leonard Fournette, like in neutral game scripts, Jacksonville is still running the football. But when they get behind, they start throwing, and there is nothing wrong with that.
Well, they should be at a neutral game script this week against the Titans. So I think everybody that was worried about Leonard Fournette, I think you can kind of silence your worries there. I think he's going to get back on track. And even Doug Marrone acknowledged it today that they had gotten away from running the football as much. They want to be more balanced, is what he said today to the media. So I think Leonard Fournette is a guy that is definitely, his arrow is going to be pointing up. He's going to get back to normal Leonard Fournette work. But look, I get it. You're losing. You got to throw the football. I understand that completely. It's just a shame that Leonard Fournette has to be that much of a volume-based running back. But look, volume-based RB1 or not, I'm trusting it. I told you guys, Mark and both of us told you guys that he's one of our guys one of our workhorses that we like for the playoff push. And even with one touchdown all season, that's the incredible thing about it. Like, one touchdown all season, and he's still RB8 overall and RB9 in rushing attempts and fantasy points per game. So, I mean, Leonard Fournette's really been outstanding this year. When he gets that work, he is doing what he needs to do with it. And I think this week he's probably going to get back on track. Yeah, I completely agree.
58 targets, 47 catches, 329 receiving yards. He's going to catch 60 plus balls this year, and that's why he is still a top 10 fantasy running back. And he's a great buy low. Yeah. He's a great buy low because he doesn't score touchdowns. And remember a year ago or 2 years ago when everyone hated Julio Jones because he couldn't score touchdowns? The dude is dropping 1,500 receiving yards and 100 catches every year, and people are like, I can't draft him. He doesn't score touchdowns.
People are complaining.
Like what? What?
He'll finish as wide receiver 4 and can't do it. Doesn't catch touchdowns. People are relying too much on touchdowns in PPR leagues.
God.
Like, this isn't standard. And look, Leonard Fournette, you talk about he's third in the NFL in yards from scrimmage. We talked about Christian McCaffrey.
The positive regression will hit. The positive touchdown regression will hit, and it wouldn't shock me if he scores like 4 touchdowns over the next 3 games.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
It'll hit.
I could agree with that. So you talked about Leonard Fournette being a buy low, which I'm 100% on board with. Let's talk about some of these buy lows, because again, we are starting to get into we are in the playoff. There's a lot of leagues where I've only got 1 regular season game left. There's my work league. I've got 2 regular season games left. So 2 or 3 games left for the most part in a lot of these leagues, and you're in the playoffs. So we definitely want to help you guys try to find some late minute buy low players that you can get your hands on. Leonard Fournette is obviously probably the biggest name out of those guys. Another one, Mark, that you like, though, is Odell Beckham Jr.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at, he's still getting the work. He's still seeing the work you want. He's got a 0.66 weighted opportunity rating, 26% target share, 38% of the air yards this year. And I mean, if you make the sample size smaller, just what he's done over the last 3 or 4 games, like over the last 3 games against good defenses, elite defenses, he's played Buffalo, he's played Denver, he's played New England, and he's played Pittsburgh. Over the last 3 games, I mean, he is still seeing a 25% target share, 51% of the air yards, 28 targets. He's only caught 14 of them. He has had some brutal cornerback matchups to go along with those. He's faced Trey White. He's faced Joe Hayden. He has seen Minkah Fitzpatrick. He has seen Chris Harris, and they all shadowed him. He's seen a shadow in 3 of the last 4 games. He's playing Miami this week. Their schedule going forward is a joke. If you can somehow buy Odell Beckham Jr., do it now, right before the playoffs start. He is a 100% buy right now.
Yeah, and look, this is not part of the struggles. I think are on him. We can't remove all blame from OBJ, but I think a lot of it is also on Baker. It's also on Freddie Kitchens. This offense as a whole just has not been what anybody thought it would be this season. But I think you're right. Odell Beckham is a guy that I've got him in numerous leagues, and I've been benching him, and it hurts to bench him because you say bench OBJ, but like we're 11 weeks into the season. We saw what he was this entire season. You know, the first 4 or 5 weeks, okay, you can maybe just be patient. But once it gets to that point, it's like, okay, you pretty much know what you're going to get right now. And that's kind of how it's been. People are benching Odell Beckham Jr. this week against the Dolphins. I think it's a bad idea at home against the Dolphins. I think Sunday he should have a very solid game. I think he at the very least, I think he gets at least 100 receiving yards. So I think he's going to have a solid game. So I agree, a definite buy low if you can do that. At tight end, I think a guy that people need to look for, maybe Jared Cook. It looks like Jared Cook. We mentioned another guy, Kyle Rudolph. That's a possibility. But again, you got to remember, whenever Adam Thielen gets back, Kyle Rudolph's target share is going to drop significantly. So that's something you got to be aware of. So I don't think that Kyle Rudolph is a buy low right now, because as soon as you buy him low, Adam Thielen will be back and he'll be a skunk for you. But I think Jared Cook, though, is a guy that seems right now to be getting a little bit more involved in the offense than he was in the beginning of the season. So 2 weeks ago against Atlanta, 10 targets. He was really worked into that offense. And then, of course, last week he only got 2 targets, but he scored the touchdown. So I don't care if you have 2 targets, at least you're getting me a touchdown. If I'm desperate at tight end, I think you could do a lot worse than Jared Cook down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, he's third on the team in target share over the last 2 games, 15% target share, 22% of the air yards. The offense is concentrated. The passing game is concentrated with Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas demanding so much work.
Of course. Yeah.
Those two have accounted for 56% of the target share over the last few games, or the last 2 games rather. But yeah, no, I'm with you. This is going to be a productive offense that moves at a good pace. They're going to be in some shootouts down the stretch. And I am interested in Jared Cook, especially if I can get him for dirt cheap.
Another buy low candidate on my list, I think you probably agree here, is DK Metcalf. Actually, we have seen sort of the rise of DK Metcalf throughout the season. You know, he started off the season. It was 4 receptions, 89 yards. That was great. That was his first game. 3 receptions, 7 targets, 61 yards. Had the touchdown. So it was like kind of hit or miss. He's starting to really turn up a little bit of that consistency lately. And I think Russell Wilson is showing you that he trusts him a lot more. So the last 3 games for DK Metcalf, he's had 3 touchdowns. 2 of those touchdowns came in one game against Atlanta. He followed that up against Tampa, 9 targets, 6 catches, 123 yards and a touchdown. And then he had 6 catches on 10 targets for 70 yards against San Francisco a couple weeks ago. So coming off the bye, I mean, you don't get many better matchups than Philadelphia. So they're on the road at Philly, and then he's got Minnesota after that, the Rams after that, and Carolina after that in his next 4 games. Philadelphia versus opposing wide receivers, Mark, 167.9 yards. That's 17th in the league. They are tied for 30th in touchdowns given up, and then fantasy points given up to wide receivers. They are 31st. Minnesota's 24th in fantasy points given up to wide receivers. The Rams are a little bit better, obviously, 11th overall, so that's not a great matchup. But Carolina in Week 15, and a lot of championship weeks, actually, is 21st in the league, and then 30th in the league to wide receivers as far as yards given up to them. So DK's really got a nice 3-4 game stretch coming up here, and I think especially this week is a big smash spot for him.
I don't know. This Eagles secondary has been getting better. They are 14th in touchdown passes allowed right now. They've only allowed 17 touchdown passes. They're allowing 6.7 yards per attempt. They're getting better. They were garbage to start the year, and they got healthy, and they're getting a little better. Even so, I don't think there's a cornerback on this team that's built to stop either one of Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. So I think this passing game is matchup proof. I'm not saying DK Metcalf himself is matchup proof. I'm saying the passing game as a whole is, because it's led by Russell Wilson. So I don't think if Tyler Lockett misses, that's good for DK Metcalf. I actually think Metcalf benefits from having Tyler Lockett on the field. And I would say the same for Tyler Lockett. I think he benefits from having DK Metcalf on the field.
Oh, 100%.
So,
to me, they are the perfect complement. Like when I picture a number 1 wide receiver, number 2 wide receiver, like this is what I picture. This is the perfect wide receiver combo in the NFL, in my opinion. I love these two together. I think they're an excellent combination. I think obviously with Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, it's even better. So I completely agree with you. I think if one of them goes down, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing for the other.
Yeah.
Now, a guy that also plays for Seattle that I think is a buy low, Jacob Hollister, the tight end. This is a guy now that the last couple games, his arrow has shot up, and he's working into that Will Dissly role. We talked about that before the show. The Will Dissly role is nothing to scoff at. Will Dissly was definitely turning it on. He was actually hurting DK Metcalf's production in the red zone early on in the season. Was Will Dissly. So Jacob Hollister, last 2 games, he's had 4 grabs, 37 yards, and 2 touchdowns 2 weeks ago. And then last week he caught 8 of 10 targets for 62 yards and a touchdown in week 10. So Hollister is a guy that I think they're going to start working more into this offense and looking for him a lot more. He's a guy that has a look of possibly a tight end of the future, 26 years old, out of Wyoming. I think Jacob Hollister is a guy that if you really are looking for some tight end help, it seems like almost every damn league I'm in, Mark, I'm looking for tight end help. And Jacob Hollister is going to be one of my most fabbed players this weekend.
If you were going to tell me back in August that in all of the leagues where I drafted George Kittle that I would be looking for tight end help, I would probably punch you in the face. But that's what's going on, and life comes at you fast. Here we are. He's seen 16 targets over the last 2 games, caught 12 of them, 3 touchdowns, played 80% and 78% of the snaps after playing 35% of the snaps against Atlanta. So he is getting work. Like, he is on the field. He is Will Dissly for all intents and purposes. And all Will Dissly did every week was catch 5 passes for 50 yards and a touchdown.
No big deal.
His floor and ceiling were the same thing. It was the same stat line. But I don't care. I will take that any day of the week. And getting this amount of work. Now, keep in mind, these last 2 games, the game script has been perfect for a tight end in a shootout. We had 74 points scored against Tampa Bay, or in the Tampa Bay game. And then we had 51 total points scored against San Francisco. So these have been shootouts, back and forth, fast paced, lot of plays run shootouts. Those are the types of games we need. I think we could be seeing that in Philly here. The total for that game is 48 right now. It's the second highest total of the week. You look further ahead at their schedule. They've got Minnesota on the schedule. That game could shoot out. Both of those teams rank very high in plays per game and, high pace. So some of these games could get, they could shoot out. There could be shootouts against Philly. There could be shootout against Minnesota. So no, I like the idea of buying Jacob Hollister a lot. And I still think even after the 2 performances he's had, people aren't looking at him.
Yeah, and we're not saying Jacob Hollister is going to be a tight end 1 rest of the season, but he could be, absolutely. I won't go that far, but I think he's absolutely a tight end 2. I think he's on the tight end 2 radar without a doubt, and I think there are a lot of worse options. If you're a guy that had George Kittle or Austin Hooper like I have, instead of relying on somebody like Jimmy Graham or even Kyle Rudolph for the next few weeks, once Adam Thielen gets back, I think Jacob Hollister is a better ad. I do. I think there's people looking at Noah Fant. I think people are looking.
I think Fant's a good ad.
I think he's a good ad. I don't think he's as good as Jacob Hollister. I think Hollister needs to be the number one waiver tight end this week, depending on who's available, of course.
I don't know who I'd favor between the two, but the only reason I would even think about considering Noah Fant over
Wilson.
Jacob Hollister is, I was going to say, like, the Broncos are going to be playing from behind almost every game. So, his target share is up to 25% with Emmanuel Sanders off the field this year. So, Noah Fant is a good buy too, but like that doesn't make Jacob Hollister a not good buy. I think tight end, there are some plays or some guys surfacing that need to be rostered in all formats.
So you and I talked about one of our favorite buy low candidates a few weeks ago. We kind of did a little bit of forecasting on him. This was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Was Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold was one of the guys that I had mentioned going into the New England game. We said, look, New England, you don't want Sam Darnold this week. Avoid him. But after that week, look Sam Darnold's way, because I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to need a quarterback at that point. A lot of fantasy teams are going to be looking for a quarterback, and I think you could do a lot worse than Sam Darnold because of how attractive the schedule was. Now, obviously, he was a couple games late on this. I will concede that point. But after New England, didn't have a great game against Jacksonville, was a little underwhelming against Miami, but then turned it on a little bit against the Giants, and then this past week against the Redskins, absolutely torched them. 293 yards, 4 touchdowns, had 1 interception, but he actually had a fantastic fantasy day. So, look, I think Sam Darnold, I think you can do a lot worse than Sam Darnold on your waiver. So if you are desperate for a quarterback, I think Sam Darnold's a guy you want to look into. Oakland, he is going to play this week at home. 27th in the league in yards given up to quarterbacks. 30th in touchdowns given up to quarterbacks. 28th in the league in fantasy points given up to quarterbacks. He's got Cincinnati after that. 20th, 16th, and 30th in the same categories. And then he gets another shot at home this time against Miami in what some fantasy leagues will have as their championship week, or at least their semifinal week. So I think we're looking at 3 solid weeks back to back to back, I think, for Sam Darnold. Now, I'm not saying expect 300 yards and 4 touchdowns like last week.
I expect that.
But I think if you're expecting 250 yards and 2 touchdowns as a floor, I'm all over that for Sam Darnold.
No, I'm expecting him to smash, dude. The next 3 defenses he plays rank 7th worst, 4th worst, and worst in yards per attempt allowed to quarterbacks, and they've all allowed at least 20 touchdown passes, except for the Bengals, who have only allowed 4. But they're also, they're getting crushed on the ground too, and that's a big part of it. And the Jets can't run the football. So if they're going to score against the Bengals, it's going to be through the air. So I really do think Sam Darnold could absolutely crush. And, we did the playoff primer with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock last year on the Fantasy Takeaway, and you and I decided that we were both going to roll Josh Allen through the playoffs, and he ended up finishing as like QB2 through the playoffs. He was a beast. And I know the producer man is going to go back and check and see what he was in the playoffs and be like, well, actually, he was the QB4. And but I really
show, gentlemen, but there's one thing we need to discuss.
Oh God, I love the producer man. Yeah, but we could see something like that from Sam Darnold, where like he literally wins people fantasy championships and nobody else decides to start him, even though he's throwing for 303 touchdowns every week. Just with this schedule, with the Bengals, with the Dolphins, and with the Raiders. These are all pass funnels. These are all guys getting killed through the air. Sam Darnold has been electric the last 2 weeks. He is heating up.
And we've seen how good the Raiders have been. I mean, we've seen how competitive of a football team they actually are. It is very conceivable this team goes up to New York and absolutely destroys the Jets, or is at least in a competitive shootout with them. Like, this could be an absolutely great fantasy game where even Le'Veon Bell gets in on the action. Please, God, let that happen.
Dude, I'm in like last place in all the leagues. I drafted Le'Veon Bell, so I don't even care if that happens.
I'm so disappointed. That was one of my biggest flops this year.
It could be worse. You may have had Le'Veon Bell ranked as like your RB2, but I had Cooper Kupp ranked as the wide receiver 33. So it happens.
Yeah, hey, right now he's been a little quiet, but that just means it's the calm before the storm, so he's going to turn it on for me.
They're
'Cause I've got him
running
in
the
a lot of leagues.
football a lot. They are running the football like a lot.
Hey, Todd Gurley. Talk about buy lows. Maybe Todd Gurley's a guy that some people could go out and get.
Well, hey, if we're talking about buying low, what about Jared Goff? I mean, he's been a lot better over the last few games. Since week 6, I just tweeted this out before the show. Since week 6, his pressure rate's down to 28%. It was up in the 40s through the first 6 weeks of the season. Like, he's been better. He's averaging almost 2 yards per attempt more per pass.
I just don't know if I trust it. Like, I just feel like I would trust Darnold even more than
I think I would
like,
too.
My options on the way. I mean, they'd have to be pretty lowly for me to take a chance there on Jared Goff. I don't know what's going on there.
I think you said it best. I think I would trust Jared Goff, or I would trust Sam Darnold more than Jared Goff.
All right, so now it's everybody's favorite time of the show where we kick it on over to the producer man to tell us what we got wrong. Producer man, what you got for us?
Almost a totally clean show there, gentlemen, but you are in fact idiots, so there are some things we need to talk about. Self-proclaimed, I might add. Chris, you said we'd find out about the Colts backfield this weekend. They play on Thursday. Mark, you said that Cook already had his bye week. Obviously, you meant CMC on that one. Josh Allen was QB3 weeks 14 through 17, QB11 weeks 14 through 16, or QB6 weeks 13 through 17. So not 2 or 4 there. The Broncos, Mark, on average, have been leading or tied for 38 minutes and 53 seconds per game this year, only trailing for 21 minutes and 7 seconds. Other than that, great show, gentlemen. No, I'm just kidding. Good stuff, guys.
Great show, gentlemen.
Very clean.
Oh, Joe knows we love him. He's the producer goat.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Joe. We appreciate that, producer man. Guys, it has been a blast as always. We love having you guys hang out with us and listen to us and support the RotoBros. Again, Mark talked about it at the beginning of the show. Please check out the RotoBros Patreon if you haven't already. $5 a month. You will get exclusive access to myself and Mark in the Discord, in the RotoBros Discord chat. We have a channel for NBA DFS, a channel for NFL DFS, and just a channel for season long and normal everyday fantasy talk. So definitely check that out. You will not regret it, and you can interact with us and all 30 plus other patrons. So there's a lot of folks in there. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of good content going on there as well. Again, you can check us out on Facebook at the group FSA Fantasy Sports Advice and Analysis. Go to Facebook, type in FSA Fantasy. You can check us out there. Mark, where's everybody going to find you?
Well, before I say that, I mean, I do want to say that one of the Patreon members has already increased his DraftKings bankroll up to nearly 1K just between advice from me and Chris. So yeah, we're rolling. You know, we're hot. When you're hot in DFS, man, you're running hot. So check out that Patreon. Check out the DFS podcast. Me and the producer, man, make that podcast. It's not just me anymore. He does it too, and that's what makes it even better, man. 2 brains better than 1. You're going to find me on Twitter at Mark Wemken, MarkWemken. You're also going to find me on thequantedge.com every week. Chris, where are we going to find you, man?
Again, you can find me on Twitter at Mind of McConnell. And as I mentioned, you can find us on Facebook at the Facebook group FSA Fantasy Sports Advice and Analysis, the largest, most active fantasy sports community on the planet. Definitely check that out. Guys, again, we have had a blast. It was a great show. A lot of good stuff. We will be back next week as well to get you primed and ready for week 13 as for a lot of teams actually enter the playoffs. So we'll be talking about that as well. And there's a couple other names that we'll probably want to get to next week, a couple big names, but we want to see what happens in week 12 with those guys. So we will have another jam-packed show ready for you guys next week as well. Again, thank you guys so much. It's been a blast. We love you. Best of luck in week 12. And as always, keep balling, baby.